Yo, what is going on with the Playboy? Let's watch a couple minutes of James King's story so that we can understand exactly what happened.
In the summer of 2014, James King was a 21-year-old college student. He was walking between two summer jobs when he encountered who he would later find out were an FBI agent and a police officer who were not in uniform, didn't identify themselves.
I remember being pretty happy that day. I'd gotten out of work early. I was happy with the job that I'd done, and I was calling my sister at the time and somewhat distracted by looking at my phone when two men approached me, stepped toward me off the curb and said, hey, who are you? And I said, I'm James. And they said, oh, really? Is that your real name? I was kind of thrown off. I was getting a weird vibe from these guys immediately. And I'm a pretty pro-social person that I would consider myself as such. So I started engaging them, but then one man stepped behind me and I felt very uncomfortable. And they asked me, is that your real name? I said, yes, that's my real name. And then they were wearing these lanyards, and one of them asked me to step aside, and they sort of had an air of authority, so I started to comply. But one of them stepped behind me, boxed me out, and took my wallet out of my back pocket. And at that point, I realized I was being mugged. So I went to flee, and I was tackled and ultimately beaten pretty severely. After some time in this altercation, and I had been blacked out, and it's hard to recall some of the details, but the police came, and then that was when I realized that they weren't muggers, but they were just acting outside of what they ever should have done in their roles as a police detective and an FBI agent. As I was being physically assaulted, I was screaming for someone to call the police because I was scared out of my mind. I was trying to get away, trying to get out of this situation, trying to survive, really fighting with everything that I could to flee as I was yelling for help and for any bystanders that might be near to call the police. When I was being choked, I feared for my life, truly. And it was a moment where everything went black. And as far as I know, that is as close as you can get to being dead without being dead. And I truly, really thought it was over in that moment. I discovered that the men that did this were police when the other police came over and didn't arrest them.
Keep in mind, the crime supposedly committed by the suspect James was mistaken for was so inconsequential, stealing empty soda cans and some liquor from his former boss, it in no way justified the incredibly violent beating James endured at the hands of the police.
The criminal justice system closed its ranks immediately. As soon as uniformed officers arrived on the scene of James's beating and realized that James was not the fugitive, one officer actually went around and caused witnesses who had videotaped or taken pictures of what happened to delete all the evidence that they had. And then James was taken immediately to the hospital, where he was handcuffed to his hospital bed before being sent to jail and charged with several felonies for resisting what he didn't even realize was an arrest. So James was innocent, got beaten up, and as a result, the prosecutor charged James with a bunch of crimes rather than anybody apologizing to James for what had happened to him. The prosecutor brought serious felony charges against James, and I'm sure expected that James would have taken the plea deal that was eventually offered. But instead, James fought it out, went to trial, and was acquitted on all charges. That's important because typically prosecutors are able to leverage these sorts of charges against someone to get them to take a plea deal and thereby prevent them from holding the officers who violated their constitutional rights to account.
I went directly from the hospital to the jail cell, where I was, stripped of my clothing, given a jumpsuit, given a mugshot. I talked to the nurse. And again, when I was there, even the other inmates, the people serving my food, I remember getting 2 dinners because they felt bad for me and knew that I didn't belong there. When I was arraigned in the jailhouse and the bail was set for $50,000, I remember feeling so defeated and so confused. And the judge who did the arraignment, I understand that they were doing their job and didn't know the situation, but they didn't look me in the eyes or anything. It was just hit the gavel and move on with your day. And I at that time had not even talked to my parents. I was alone and scared and did not know what to do. I do not feel that I did anything to spark this event at all. I did nothing wrong. Walking on the sidewalk as a normal citizen on a sunny summer day going to my internship. After I was released from jail, much to my surprise, I wasn't given an apology. I was charged. The police officers charged me with 3 violent felonies. I had to go to trial, a jury of my peers 6 months later, and I spent that whole 6 months probably the most scared and the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life, having no idea if I'm gonna spend the next 10 years of my life in prison for something that I didn't do. When I was in trial, I remember my attorneys telling me, most people don't win against the government, and we know that you did nothing wrong, but if they offer you a plea, you should consider taking it. And they did, and I said no. I said, no, I didn't do anything wrong, and I don't deserve to be thrown in jail for something that I was on the wrong side of. That trial was 2 days, 2 very intense days, very stressful. And I remember my family sitting behind me and audibly gasping and crying at the stories that the police officers were making up on the stand as to the supposed terrible things that I had done. And I remember me being on the stand and addressing the questions as best I could and trying to help the jury understand that I was not there because I was a criminal, and that being charged of criminal offenses doesn't mean that you did them. When the jury came back, they unanimously acquitted me of all charges. Myself, my 2 attorneys, Anthony Green and Julia Kelly, jumped up. We all hugged. I cried. My family ran towards me. We all celebrated a lot. I went from extreme state of stress to relief, and it was a lot for my mind to sort of take in at the moment. And I remember as I was walking out of the courtroom, one of the jurors ran up to me and she gave me a hug and she said, "I'm so thankful." She said, "I knew the whole time that you did not belong there, and these men did terrible things to you."
I've known James for years now. I've pretty much been working on this case since its inception. And it's been very difficult, even as a third party, to see the toll that this has taken on James. It's very clearly affected him in his day-to-day life, and it's something that never leaves him.
In the aftermath of this incident happening to me, I had a hard time trusting in general, but especially the system, as I'd always been brought up to believe that the police and the people in authority were the people to go to if you needed help. After being assaulted by them, I was incredibly nervous and still am to this day around police. And I had a 180 of fearing the very people that you should go to if
Isn't that funny? You back the blue until it happens to you.
you're in trouble and if you need help. Even in my dating life, as a young man, the internet is used these days a lot to go on first dates, and often they will go well until they Google me and see these weird things about me, and then that's the end of that. Similar experiences with job interviews, or even I have a stable, wonderful employment right now, but I cannot work federal jobs, which is a large part of our business. So these things continually dig into my personal and emotional life all these years later, and that has been an effort that is ongoing to help myself kind of get over this. After I was beaten by these police officers, I never received an apology. I still never have. I don't think they apologized because I don't think that they're sorry for their actions. I don't think they've been taught to have accountability for those types of actions. And they knew, as well as the rest of their department knew, that they would be okay, that they could charge me and possibly get away with it. I would like to hold these officers to account for their misactions, in large part because of the system and how broken it is. These officers did something that was illegal and then charged me for crimes, and the system closed around them and helped them get away with that. There is zero accountability, and I know that this extends beyond the 2 officers that assaulted me. I know that it extends to different departments around the United States. And having that system be reformed from the top down, and having our citizens be more aware of their rights and hold each and every officer accountable for their actions would be a great start and a great way for this case to close.
It's important to hold these 2 officers accountable because they violated the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment prevents the government from undertaking unreasonable searches and seizures. Here, every step of the way, the officers were unreasonable in searching and seizing James, including when they beat him. We filed this lawsuit in 2016. It's now 2020. The government still hasn't even filed an answer addressing all the claims that we've raised. Instead, they've spent the last 4 years filing different motions with courts, arguing under technicalities why they shouldn't be held accountable, rather than explaining why what they did actually wasn't wrong. One of the main ways that the government avoids accountability for violating the Constitution is through a doctrine that's called qualified immunity. And through that doctrine, the Supreme Court created a standard where a police officer, any government official, can violate your constitutional rights, and you can do nothing about it unless you can prove that the right was clearly established. Qualified immunity is a doctrine that the United States Supreme Court created in 1982. And it says that a government actor is allowed to violate your constitutional rights. You can't do anything about it unless a court has already decided that the actor's specific actions are, in fact, a constitutional violation. And what that means is that courts have gotten more and more specific in distinguishing between cases. For example, there's a case this year from the Sixth Circuit where police officers allowed their dog to bite a suspect who had given up. And the suspect pointed to a case where the officers had allowed their dog to bite a suspect who'd given up and said, this case is clearly established. This is a violation of my rights. The Sixth Circuit said, well, actually it isn't, because in that case, the suspect was laying on the ground when he gave up. And in your case, you were just sitting on the ground with your hands up. So the officer couldn't have known that that was a constitutional violation. When a plaintiff seeks to hold a government officer liable or accountable for constitutional violations, they usually use one of 2 tools. The first is called Section 1983. That's a statute that Congress created in the 19th century. And essentially it says that you're allowed to bring a lawsuit against someone who violates your constitutional rights under color of state law. The second is called Bivens. And that is a case that the Supreme Court decided and essentially adopted the similar standard for actions taken under color of federal law. So in this case, what we have is a situation where 2 officers were seeking to enforce a Michigan warrant for a Michigan crime against a Michigan resident committed in the state of Michigan and at the request of a Michigan police chief. But those officers have both sought to avoid accountability in this case by saying, notwithstanding all of the Michigan aspects of what we were doing, we were actually not acting under color of Michigan law, but under color of federal law. And because of that, they have been able to create all sorts of havoc in this case to avoid any accountability for what they did.
We've seen an explosion in the use of state and federal joint task forces nationwide in recent decades. They now operate in all 50 states. To take just one example of how rapidly these task forces have expanded.
So that comes from the 1994 crime bill called Operation Relentless Pursuit.
The FBI and NYPD formed their first terrorism joint task force in 1979. By 2001, there were 35. Today, there are about 200, involving officers from more than 650 different state and federal agencies. In an unusual turn of events, both James and the police officers are taking James' case to the U.S. Supreme Court. Here's why. Police and prosecutors are asking the Supreme Court to overturn James's victory and immunize the officers against all of James' claims. James won his case before the federal appeals court in every way but one. The appeals court ruled that the officers acted under federal law, and so they could not be held to account for violating state authority under Section 1983. Unless the Supreme Court steps in, James can only pursue the officers for violating their federal authority under Bivens, but they could not be held to account under state law. James is asking to have the appeals court ruling corrected so that he and other people who have their rights violated by task force members can hold officers accountable under both state and federal law. James and IJ want to end the shell game police and prosecutors have been playing in these kind of cases, where they say we can't be sued under state law because we were acting under federal law, while at the same time saying we can't be sued under federal law because we were acting under state law. The government wants to maintain a system where it's heads they win, tails you lose. That's unfair and it's unlawful. James's case is part of IJ's new project on immunity and accountability. Immunity doctrines turn fundamental concepts of American jurisprudence on their head. If citizens must follow the law, the government must also, and that includes following the Constitution. And following the Constitution means officials being held accountable for violating it. The Institute for Justice represents James to ensure that law enforcement officers can't operate above the law and free from the Constitution they were sworn to uphold. A victory for James will set an important precedent through which members of all state and federal joint task forces will be held to account for their actions.
James King was brutally beaten, and a Grand Rapids detective who mistook him for a wanted criminal.
Oh my God, they're pounding him in the head. They're going to kill this man.
The authorities quickly realized that James wasn't the man they were looking for, but to cover their excessive use of force, James was charged with multiple felonies. He refused a plea deal, was acquitted by a jury, and launched a lawsuit against the officers who violated his constitutional rights. Nearly a decade after his beating, James's suit is still in court, having already reached the Supreme Court in 2020. The court's ruling sent James's case back to the lower courts with specific instructions the court pretty much ignored. James and IJ are now asking the Supreme Court to hear the case again.
The case has to be heard again.
Officers of the law take an oath to follow the Constitution. When they break it, they must be held accountable.
So, do me a favor. First, hi, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. How's everybody doing today? Everybody hit the like button, if you would, real quick. And then put OTVO in the chat. Overturn Terry versus Ohio. Put the one in the chat at OTVO, if you would. And hit the like button. Just take a second. Just hit the like button. So, the case went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, who are appointed from the oligarchs of our society, the Supreme Court didn't think that it was probably the top pressing issue in the United States of America is police brutality. The Supreme Court said, let's kick this back down to the lower court. The only thing that conservative Supreme Court justices consistently do, well, that's not consistently. Throughout the 20s and the 30s, the Supreme Court upheld the NFA, the National Firearms Act, and they upheld in the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre in United States versus Miller in 1939, which upheld the infringement of the Second Amendment, and that was mostly Supreme Court conservative members. And so lately they've been upholding gun rights, but conservatives consistently give our rights to the police. Consistently, Scalia, Roberts, you name one, Rehnquist, Berger, and these are the Supreme Court chief justices over the past several courts. They constantly give our rights to Howard Taft. They're just horrible. And so why do you think the Supreme Court would kick it back down to the lower court and say, you guys need to come up with a solution here? Because they're all in it together. They're against us. We should not have an appointed Supreme Court. They should be elected every 10 years by the people directly, because the Supreme Court are the people in charge of our civil liberties, our Fourth Amendment right to illegal searches and seizures. If they're not taking up Fourth Amendment Supreme Court cases, or they take it up and they kick it back down to the lower court, then those people are not the stewards of our constitutional rights, of our God-given rights that you're born with. We say RAPS, religion, assembly, petition, press, speech. we say the term RAPS because that's what recognizes our rights, that we have these inalienable rights given to us by God at birth. You have the right to speak, you have the right to be pressed, you have the right to petition, you have the right to assemble, and you have the right to religion. And we say that term because it is as though it's granting or giving us these rights when these rights come from God. These inalienable rights come from God. And if the Fourth Amendment recognizes that there should not be unreasonable searches and seizures created by a government structure, then if the Supreme Court doesn't see that, then the Supreme Court is supremely flawed. That the men who and women who have been appointed and anointed by oligarchs for the rest of their lives, maybe quite possibly that's a bad system. Maybe that's a bad idea. So nothing happened with this guy's case. He went and got the current biggest dog on the block, the Institute for Justice, to take up his case. They went to the Supreme Court. They filed. I'm sure there was a bunch of amicus briefs from a bunch of different other civil libertarians who wrote an amicus brief to the Supreme Court justices and said, hey, you need to hear this case. And I'm sure a bunch of the statist and federal people also had amicus briefs submitted to the Supreme Court. But this guy's case went absolutely nowhere. And it's just such a flawed system that we're all forced to live within. And when you hear that the case went nowhere, it's so unbelievably insane that we have appointed men and now women to be the stewards of our God-given rights, our right to not be attacked by government agents. And we can't get justice, and the Supreme Court won't hear the case. This is why I made this live tonight, so that you guys would understand that it's a broken system. The system itself is broken. We can fix it, but we have to get those people elected, because then you would be able to get an ethics committee around them, and then guys like Clarence Thomas would be gone. We can't get an ethics committee around the Supreme Court, and they're appointed for life. Let me give you the two scenarios here. And okay, we can't get an ethics device around the Supreme Court. And that's 3 steps: a place to file a complaint, an investigatory process for that complaint, and then a report based on what the findings of that investigation were, and then possible remedies for the ethics violations. We can't get that 3-tiered system in place for the Supreme Court. On the other side, they're appointed to life, for life, by oligarchs, and the richest people in the world tell our leaders, our representatives, who they want to appoint and anoint onto the Supreme Court, who will do the bidding for big business. That's I'm telling you how it works. I'm laying it out. Like this is how it works. John Roberts should be head of the Chamber of Commerce. He is the leading corporatist in America. Every single month, the Supreme Court has holdings that you and I don't ever talk about and don't ever read, because it's not regarding our civil rights. It's regarding our money. It's regarding our money. And so that's just knowing what I know here just makes me sick. I really, truly, truly wish that I didn't know the things that I knew, because then I could go back to being asleep and walking around and thinking that so there's a couple parts of this video, though. There's a couple places here that I wanted to jump in, but I wanted you guys to hear the whole presentation. There's a couple places where he says at one point, I was going to pull the video back up, but I'll just recite what I remember, that he now, when he sees police, that these are not the people he goes to. These are the people that he fears. And he said he did a 180. Put a 1 in the chat if you have a similar story, because there's so many people who are now, every single day, there's a new person who does a 180, and they leave that side where they trust the state. Well, I had to file a police report for when someone broke into the car and stole some stuff out of the car. And I had to go down and talk to the coppers, and I recorded it. I mean, I haven't released it, but just the process of having to go down and talk to the coppers. And I know what a horrid organization it is. That's just the simple fact. You don't have to agree with everything that I am, or agree with the rather harsh way I stand on my rights when someone tries to remove me or change my liberty from a position I have on the earth as a free individual. You understand? I don't have to move. And so if you tell me to move, well, I'm probably going to be rude to you, because you've already infringed on my liberty in 40,000 ways. But I am going to show a little bit more of that video, because there's something I want to show you guys here that we may not have, that I may not have covered properly. So let me just go to my history here. I'm going to pull this video up. There's a couple things I actually do want to cover that I remember. I wanted to show you guys the follow-up, because it was like, here it is. I still got it up right here. I'm actually going to show this to you a little bit more. I'm going to show you a couple of clips here that I'll go down into the corner of the box down here, and I will show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. And this is super important, that you actually understand the variations of law that I'm going to teach you right here.
Who are you? I said, I'm James. And they said, oh, really? Is that your real name? I was kind of thrown off, you know.
Okay, how come the police are allowed to question James when there's no probable cause? So just so you know, there's a consensual conversation you can have with police, but clearly in this particular instance, the police are there questioning him based on suspicion, not probable cause. How come it is the police can walk up to him and start to question him? What is that case called? It's called what? It's called Terry versus Ohio. Terry versus Ohio is the reason why cops can walk up to him and just say, hey, what's going on with you? What are you doing? Let's keep going.
I was getting a weird vibe from these guys immediately. And I'm a pretty pro-social person, that I would consider myself as such. So I started engaging them, but then one man stepped behind me and I felt very uncomfortable. And they asked me, is that your real name? I said, yes, that's my real name. And then they were wearing these lanyards, and one of them asked me to step aside, and they sort of had an air of authority. So I started to comply, but one of them stepped behind me, boxed me out, and took my wallet out of my back pocket. And
Okay, so how come cops can pull him to the side and say they want to talk to him and even illegally seize his products? Because of Terry versus Ohio, they can detain him based on their suspicion. Completely the opposite of the Fourth Amendment, that no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. These two coppers initiated action with him based on Terry, based on suspicion of a person that someone else told them had done something wrong. They happened to be wrong in their assertion as to who the man was, but they entered into his life through Terry, and now they're threatening and they're going to detain him based under Terry.
at that point, I realized I was being mugged. So I went to run, to flee, and I was tackled and ultimately beaten pretty severely.
And so now they're using the 1989 case of Graham versus Connor. In 1984, DeThorne Graham was attacked by the police. It went to the Supreme Court. The amount of force used by the officers can be the probable cause they believe in their mind that he may have done before this interaction. What the police believe in their mind. That's a 1989 case called Graham versus Connor.
After some time in this altercation, and I had been blacked out, and
they're using the amount of perceived force that they deemed that they felt was necessary. That's a legal holding written by the FBI called objective reasonableness. The objective reasonableness of the reasonable officer on the scene will determine the amount of force to be used on you.
it's hard to recall some of the details, but the police came, and then that was when I realized that they weren't muggers, but they were just acting outside of what they ever should have done in their roles as a police detective.
Well, actually, they weren't. They entered into his life doing a Terry stop, and then they invoked Graham versus Connor, saying that, well, we had been told that he'd been doing something, so we feared for our safety.
FBI agent. As I was being physically assaulted, I was screaming for someone to call the police.
And there's only one organization to call. There's only one number that has a complete monopoly on reason. And when those new people come that you've called, they're going to be on the same side as the people who are already there, that are against you, that are hurting you, that are beating you.
Because I was scared out of my mind. I was trying to get away, trying to get out of this situation, trying to survive, really fighting with everything that I could to flee as I was yelling for help and for any bystanders that might be near to call the police.
And if you're a bystander, you cannot get involved because they'll shoot you. They'll shoot you down dead like a dog in the road if you stop them from viciously pounding a man who's blacking in and out of consciousness.
When I was being choked, I feared for my life, truly. And it was a moment where everything went black. And as far as I know, that is as close as you can get to being dead without being dead.
This idea that the government can choke us, when you're being choked, if you've trained in mixed martial arts or you've trained in jiu-jitsu or pankration or sambo or any of grappling, any basic sport where you use chokes, then you know as well as I do, one of the most important things when you train is to have the proper training partners. Because some people think it's funny to continue a move, to continue to choke you or twist your elbow or your shoulder just a little bit more, and then you get injured or you get really turned off because they black you out when you tapped. And there's no point in blacking me out. You got the grip, dude. Congratulations. And so now this guy has a guy on his back who's choking him unconscious, violently attacking him. He doesn't know if he goes unconscious if the guy's going to let go.
And I truly, really thought it was over in that moment. I discovered that the men that did this were police when the other police came over and didn't arrest them.
Keep in mind, the crime supposedly committed by the suspect James was mistaken for was so inconsequential, stealing empty soda cans and some liquor from his former boss, it in no way justified the incredibly violent beating James endured at the hands of the police.
And so where's the accountability? Remember what the story is about. The police chief called these two coppers to go in and handle it because the employer was a friend of the police chief's. Where's the accountability for the police chief who gave the order? We just failed to go up the chain of command to the city manager, to the council member, to the commissioner, to the governor.
The criminal justice system closed its ranks immediately. As soon as uniformed officers arrived on the scene of James's beating and realized that James was not the fugitive, one officer actually went around and caused witnesses who had videotaped or taken pictures of what happened to delete all the evidence that they had.
Okay, right there. You do not delete any videos. You lock the phone. You should not have your thumbprint or your face on your phone. That should not be a thing for you. You should not have it. It should not be happening. None of my phones have those. None of them, because they'll unlock your phone. You do not delete footage. You tell the cop it's my First Amendment right. You have someone else film it. You go live on any platform and you get that footage out there. You do not let the cops take your phone away from you or make you delete your footage. You absolutely die standing on your rights. You do not give it up. It's our last bastion of hope.
And then James was taken immediately to the hospital where he was handcuffed to his hospital bed.
He's got to be torture cuffed
before being sent to jail and charged with several felonies for resisting what he didn't even realize was an arrest.
So right there, we know what happened. We know the story. The police chief gave the order. They got the wrong guy. And even if there was the right guy, they just went to dispense pain to someone who had stole beer or whatever the BS was they said. And so we just once again, we skipped the accountability part of the whole thing.
So James was innocent, got beaten up, and as a result, the prosecutor charged James with a bunch of crimes.
The prosecutor's in on it. They charged him. It went through a trial.
Rather than anybody apologizing to James for what had happened to him.
Why don't the Institute for Justice, you guys are an amazing group, why don't you sue the prosecutor for malicious prosecution?
The prosecutor brought serious felony charges against James, and I'm sure expected that James would have taken the plea deal that was eventually offered. But instead, James fought it out, went to trial, and was acquitted on all charges. That's important because typically prosecutors are able to leverage these sorts of charges against someone to get them to take a plea deal and thereby prevent them from holding the officers who violated their constitutional rights to account.
Okay, so I've said this before. Prosecutors get bonuses every year based on their winning percentage. So they need you to plead guilty to something. They need your guilty plea. If they don't get a guilty plea from you, then that ruins. Then they're sitting in the cigar bar in the end of the year on New Year's, and they're puffing on their stogies, going, "Oh yeah, I got a 97.6%. Yeah, I got 98.1. Oh yeah, I'm 99. Oh yeah, I'm 99.8% conviction rate." And that's how they get their money. That's how they get their bonuses. That's their whole goal, is their conviction rate. And so that will change. When I'm executive, that changes from the top down. There'll be no more conviction rate. The state should not work because remember, they're making money as they throw you in the dungeon. There's someone making money on the other end of that. That's why we keep locking up bums and homeless people.
I went directly from the hospital to the jail cell.
Right.
Where I was, stripped of my clothing, given a jumpsuit, given a mugshot. I talked to the nurse. And again, when I was there, even the other inmates, the people serving my food, I remember getting 2 dinners because they felt bad for me and
because he's a victim of the state.
Knew that I didn't belong there.
It's not that you don't belong there. And this is why I wanted to run it back. So I'm glad we found this part. It's not that you don't belong there. It's that really nobody does. Only a small fraction of the population is actually criminally insane or pedophilia. The rest, the 96% of people, if you put them in a dungeon and treat them like garbage, they will devolve to Lord of the Flies. That's what will happen to human beings when you lock them in cages and treat them like ever-living shite while you pretend as though you're providing any kind of service. The entire dungeon system, if America was better off now that we've locked up 7 million plus people since Terry, and those are statistics from just a couple years ago, so we're probably more like 9-10 million by now, then if locking up all these millions and millions of people has made our society better, then I have yet to see it. Put a 1 in the chat if it has not helped us at all. It has only hurt us, locking up people who were just on the verge of being bad before, but now they're horrible. Or they come out broken and they can't catch up because society left them behind.
When I was arraigned in the jailhouse and the bail was set for $50,000, I remember feeling so defeated and so confused.
That's why they strip searched him, to demoralize him, to dehumanize him.
And the judge who did the arraignment,
the judge is in on it. The judge who did the arraignment, he's in on it.
I understand that they were doing their job and did.
No, he wasn't doing his job. He's in on it. That's why you can't record in the courtroom, because they're in on it. They don't want you to see what they're doing. They can change the record.
Know the situation, but they didn't look me in the eyes or anything. It was
no, it's inhumane. They don't look you in the eyes. You're just another number. They have to feed the beast. There are people in there who are being paid to guard skin. Those people need to get paid. Your skin is going to feed the beast. We have an entire lobbying arm from Core Civic. That's the name of the gigantic stock that owns the gigantic farms of prisoners. They make money based on every 8 hours. You don't get out for at least 8 hours, even if you just get booked in.
It's just hit the gavel and move on with your day. And I, at that time, had not even talked to my parents.
Dude, they don't care about you, your parents, or anything. You have to feed the beast with your skin going through the dungeon system. Every person who touched you along the route is making money.
I was alone and scared and did not know what to do.
They don't give you your phone or any way to communicate for security reasons because people are going to try to break into the dungeon. That's not happening in America. It's not happening. But they take away all of your devices because then you can't communicate with anybody and you're completely helpless. They'll take away your medication as well. So if you have any kind of high blood pressure or heart disease or heart problems, or you need any kind of medication for autoimmune disease, you're not going to get it.
I do not feel that I did anything to spark this event at all. I did nothing wrong. Walking on the sidewalk as a normal citizen on a sunny summer day, going to my internship.
That's Terry versus Ohio. This right here is the reason I spent the last There's 5 minutes and 14 seconds into this. This is the reason why I stopped and came back to this video right now to talk to you. This line right here, you have to understand something. And the reason why I'm on the mission that I'm on.
Know what to do.
Listen,
I do not feel that I did anything to spark this event at all. I did nothing wrong. Walking on the sidewalk as a normal citizen on a sunny summer day going to my internship.
that's Terry versus Ohio. Without Terry versus Ohio, the police don't have a right to detain you. He was Terry stopped. What he just said right now, the reason why the police can grab you and do what they did to him using Graham is because of Terry versus Ohio. Without Terry versus Ohio, the cops could not have grabbed him. The cops could not have snatched him up. They snatched him up using a holding from 1968 called Terry versus Ohio. You have to understand this. The qualified immunity aspect that they're suing for is coming after everything has already happened to him. After his eyes were so beaten, they were all completely ruined and bloodshot. This was a Terry stop. Tell all your friends. There's no such thing as detainment without Terry. The detainment process they used, they invoked the use of force holding from Graham versus Connor in 1989, but they Terry stopped him first. Then they said, based on the information we had to take him down hard. The attorneys found out that was garbage. It was a personal vendetta. The police chief asked these two coppers to go get him because a friend of the police chief's said this was an ex-employee of mine, and here's he stole some beer and whatever he did. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. If you learn anything, put OTVO in the chat right now. Overturn Terry versus Ohio. This is the reason why I came back to this video, because when I heard him say, I wanted you guys to watch it without me interrupting, but when I heard him say, I was just walking down the road, going to my internship in America, I had to say, okay, wait a minute. I got to come back to that. That's Terry. The cops can grab you right now on the street because of Terry. Cops can't grab you if Terry is overturned. Cops can't grab you. Cops can't go hands-on with you unless they're putting up crime tape or there's reason, there is actual violence going on, not reasonable articulable suspicion. Cops couldn't grab you. No more grabbing of you without Terry.
After I was released from jail, much to my surprise, I wasn't given an apology. I was charged. The police officers charged me with 3 violent felonies.
Institute for Justice, it's a question, using the 2022 case of Thompson versus Clark, which allows you to sue for malicious prosecution. Can the Institute for Justice sue the prosecutor who charged him with 3 felonies? That would be my question for them, because they're going to know better than I. I mean, I believe that you could go back and sue them for malicious prosecution.
I had to go to trial, a jury of my peers 6 months later, and I spent
That's a malicious prosecution.
that whole 6 months probably the most scared and the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life.
Oh, it's not just that. It's not just that you're scared and stressed. It's that you uninsurable. You can't go on to school campuses. You can't go into certain businesses. I couldn't work for a production company when I was charged with 5 felonies in 2002. Couldn't go onto a production lot. They couldn't insure me if I booked a job as an actor back in 2002. There's a host of things you can't do. You're under felony indictment. If you want to raise some money, you have to tell all the investors that you're under felony indictment. If you raise money and you haven't disclosed that you're under felony indictment, you committed fraud and you can be charged.
Having no idea if I'm going to spend the next 10 years of my life in prison for something that I didn't do. When I was in trial, I remember my attorneys telling me, most people don't win against the government, and we know that you did nothing wrong, but if they offer you a plea, you should consider taking it.
And this is the mantra of almost all attorneys. A lot of people make fun of me and say that you're your own attorney. And so, and I have people who help me and scholars who help me, and I have a lot of help, and God bless my help. Thank you guys. You know who you are. But when you go to an attorney, how many people, put a 1 in the chat if you've read in any of my comments or you've commented, hey, Chili, I need help suing the cops in this city, this town, this state, this place. Why do people say that to me all the time? Because I sue lots of bad cops. I'm in 6 different lawsuits around the country. DLZ Clips is going to make a video and he's going to show it to you. It's coming out. I'm waiting for him to finish it. So DLZ Clips, I can't wait for you to be done with that. But the reason why people reach out to me, and I can't sue for you, even if you have standing, because I'm not an attorney. The cases that I'm involved with, I have standing. Or I match people up with people who I know, and then I say, there you guys go, get going, walk away from me. I don't know anything about your case. I don't know what's going on. There's other people helping you, but I'm not a part of it. I can facilitate if your case is egregious and you have it on video. I can facilitate some of my people. Possibly. It's not likely, just so you know. I have court tomorrow. I had court yesterday. I have court all the time. So the reason why he had to go to the Institute for Justice is because attorneys won't help you. A lot of attorneys won't help you.
And they did. And I said, no. I said, no, I didn't do anything wrong. And I don't deserve to be thrown in jail for something that I was on the wrong side of. That trial was 2 days, 2 very intense days, very stressful.
You dream when you're going through it, as I went through it in 2002 and 2003. You dream, you go to a pretrial hearing and you're charged with 5 felonies. I got 2 of my felonies removed because they were just ridiculous, like transporting across state lines for distribution. Like, whoa, I'm not a drug dealer, number 1, but like, it's just these 2 charges. I can't remember all of them, but 2 of the felonies get removed. We have a meeting, Robert Shapiro and I, with the district attorney of Los Angeles. We sit down with him and he says, hey, look, congratulations on getting those 2 charges taken off the charge list. But I'll tell you what, you take a plea deal right now for these other 3 felonies, 1 year in prison, 5 years probation, $100,000 fine. We walk away from this, or tomorrow I refile those 2 felony charges against you. I turn to Robert Shapiro and I say, Mr. Shapiro, can he do that? Can he refile those charges? We just got them removed. And Shapiro says, absolutely, he can refile the charges. I leave that night. I wake up in the middle of the night crying. I wake up in the middle of the night full tears, sobbing. The cops are coming to my door. They're going to arrest me. I know it. They're going to refile the charges and issue another no-knock raid warrant. They're going to issue another. They're going to raid me again. They're going to do another no-knock raid on me as soon as they reissue these 2 charges. That's real. That's real. I wake up full on. I mean, you can see the emotional reaction I'm having now, just remembering it with you. He's going to refile those charges. And because they're refiling felony charges, they're going to drop another warrant in and they're going to come and arrest me again. My dream doesn't know the difference between reality and fake. My dream just did it. Didn't change that I woke up crying. Didn't change that I woke up afraid. Didn't change. I woke up shaking, sweat going all down my body. Was never a drug dealer. I've never had anything to do with drug dealing ever in my entire life, ever. But yet I was still charged with 5 felonies because of their confidential informant told them.
And I remember my family sitting behind me and audibly gasping and crying at the stories that the police officers were making up on the stand as to the supposed terrible things that I had done. And I remember me being on the stand and addressing the questions as best I could and trying to help the jury understand that I was not there because I was a criminal, and that being charged of criminal offenses doesn't mean that you did them. When the jury came back, they unanimously acquitted me of all charges. Myself, my 2 attorneys, Anthony Green and Julia Kelly, jumped up. We all hugged. I cried. My family ran towards me. We all celebrated a lot. I went from extreme state of stress to relief, and it was a lot for my mind to sort of take in at the moment. And I remember as I was walking out of the courtroom, one of the jurors ran up to me and she gave me a hug and she said, I'm so thankful. She said, I knew the whole time that you did not belong there and these men did terrible things to you.
I've known
So not only did those men do terrible things to him, the prosecutor did, the judge did. I still think y'all should reach out to Institute for Justice and ask if they can sue that prosecutor under Thompson versus Clark. I don't know the answer. I'd like to know. So, it's just, and then so the case goes all the way to the Supreme Court and they kick it back down to the lower court, which essentially means nothing happened. It's a nothing burger. They still are invoking qualified immunity. But you have to understand that the whole case stems from a Terry stop. The entire case of what happened to James King stems from a Terry stop. And that's why I had to cover this video and talk about James King, because the case that they pushed and they took to court was for qualified immunity. But without the detention part in Terry versus Ohio, they can detain you. They wouldn't have been able to touch James. They could have followed him. They could have questioned him. They could have asked him, but they wouldn't have had a right to detain him. Detainment only started in 1968 in the United States of America. There was no such thing as you're detained before 1968. And with the camera system today, you don't really need to physically detain people anymore if we had a proper camera system. And that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different conversation. Tribe, what's going on, buddy? How you guys doing? Listen, have you guys got an indestructible trifold or a digital trifold? If you're unfamiliar with DeleteLaws.com, that's what I do for a living, for you, for the people. You should have that indestructible trifold on you, especially if you're a freedom fighter. If you ever address cops, you should have that indestructible trifold on you at all times. In your cars especially, you should have an indestructible trifold in your car. It goes right on your visor. I send you this nice thick rubber band. It goes right on your visor with your license, registration, proof of insurance. You should not be driving around without a trifold in your car. I give away hundreds, thousands since I started making trifolds. I've given away thousands of trifolds. You guys contact me through my website. I'll send you one digitally for free that you print at home. I would prefer that you bought it. It's $9. But if you don't have $9, then I'll give it to you for free. So, but you should have these in your car. I sell them because this is how I make a living, but I also sell them so that you have a way to not talk to cops when you are in the cop car. Listen, we've seen, it's not if you don't talk to them. If you interact with cops in any way, shape, or form, you might be going to the dungeon. So I want everybody to have a trifold. You should always carry a trifold. For the love of God, it's only $9 for a digital download. It's $30 for the indestructible trifold. Please make sure you consider going to DeleteLaws.com with a Z and get a trifold. Go to the inquiry form if you need one for free and put inquiry and say, hey, yo, Chili, I'm on a fixed income. $9 to me is money right now, and we'll send you one for free. So, but if you can, thanks for your support too. I appreciate it. God bless you guys. So I just want to make sure I said that. Mark Bear, what's going on? How you guys doing? Vicky, how is everybody? Kinetic Customs and Framing, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? So now you guys know it all happens with a Terry stop. You don't know what a Terry stop is? So just so you know, Action Jackson Terry is in association with the percentage of stops. You know, they're going to give you different numbers because we can't really get an accurate, fair number from police departments, because they're going to say that if they get a call for service, that's not a Terry stop, that's somebody who called in on you. And that's about 50% of the police interaction is from a service call. So now, what do we know about the Constitution? It says no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. So if I'm a peace officer and I get a call for service and I go out to where you are, I can easily then look around and say, is there any probable cause here? Is someone in the act of committing a crime? Am I witnessing a crime happening? If there's no probable cause, everything after that becomes my Terry suspicion based on my phone call. I'm reasonably articulable suspicious of you because I got a phone call. And so now I'm in the scene, but there's no probable cause being committed. Probable causes where you have broken the law. Now, it's being supported by oath or affirmation that someone called for service, but that's not being supported by oath or affirmation that there's probable cause here. There's the big difference between reasonable articulable suspicion and probable cause. If I'm going by a Fourth Amendment standard and I'm a peace officer and I step on the scene, if there's no law being broken, no babe weeping in the streets as they've been assaulted, then my job here is to observe and see if there is probable cause being committed. Terry versus Ohio creates proactive policing where I got a call for service and now I don't see any probable cause, but I'm going to be reasonably articulable suspicious because someone called me. Someone called me. So now I'm just going to come out, take a look around. And on the way, if you feel insulted by that or violated that I'm questioning you, well, then now I'm in fear for my life. You need to get on your knees, lay on your belly. I'm just going to put you in handcuffs for your safety and mine. And that's what Terry creates. That's a Terry stop right there. So now you get a call for service that becomes a Terry stop because there was no probable cause. The reason why this guy's on the ground in torture cuffs is because the cop's ego doesn't like that someone's saying, what are you doing here? Oh, well, we got a call that someone was vandalizing here. Well, I live here. There's no vandalism going on. You can go now. Oh, what do you mean I can go now? I got a call for service. Let me see your hands. There it begins. And that's what we're seeing all over the country. That's what we're seeing. That's why I'm a broken record about Terry versus Ohio. This was not a video about qualified immunity. This was a video so I could teach you, here's a Terry stop. There it is. Okay. Okie dokie pokey smoky. What's going on? Mark, how is everybody? How is everybody? I woke up to this and I was like, oh, dude, really? It was kind for sure. Donald, thank you. I appreciate it, man. Two different cash apps came in today from Donald and Adam. And Donald said, enjoy dinner on me, bud. And then Adam said, this is for your bravery and your diligent work. This you know, I know you guys like to watch me just fillet these coppers because they're just such dunce caps. But you know what Adam said here, for your bravery and your diligent work. This is the diligent work. This is the diligent work to teach you guys what is happening in a stop that people are not seeing, to show you in between the lines where we could probably sue the prosecutor under Thompson versus Clark. And I don't know if anybody had considered that just yet in this conversation with us. And so, Adam, thank you for the Cash App, man. I appreciate it. Oh, by the way, thank you to everybody who subscribed to My Friend Writes On. We got him over 1,000, and now he's going to just get a little drip of that YouTube money, just a little, you know, it's going to be small. He's only got 1,000, so he's only going to get like, you know, $20, $30, something like that. If everybody watches all of his videos, it's small. I mean, unless DLZ Eclipse and I are like bumping out video after video after video, you know, it's the money's smaller than the, but thank you guys for all you new subscribers. We're growing at almost 50,000 subscribers a month right now. 50,000 subscribers a month. That's crazy. That's crazy. What's up with the Playboy? What's up, Playboy? What's up? I got court tomorrow morning. I got a couple of motions I got to work on tonight. I have some stuff I got to read. There's things I got to, and then I got to prep a little bit, but it's pretty much tomorrow's just a blah, blah, blah until we get to the discovery phase and we get to the trial phase. So, and then I'm not sure if you guys know or not, but Apple Valley gave me a ticket. You guys remember Apple Valley in California? Apple Valley gave me a ticket. And for all of the people who say Chile loses, we won that one. We won our declaration in court and the case has been dismissed. I mean, that's what the trolls are saying. I haven't even looked, but you're not going to win them all, but you win some, you lose some. I'm going to be just like anybody else. I'm going to win as many as I can and lose some because I'm going to keep on swinging the axe. I'm going to keep, do I have Jeff Hates Pigs? And maybe I got to do an earlier one to catch the Cope Doggy Dog. Maybe I got to go a little earlier to catch Cope. And V Boyer, I haven't seen V Boyer in a second. Action Jackson, Kevin Barber, what's going on? What's going on? Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all your support. For the love of God, have a trifold in your car. Have a trifold. Have a trifold. I got a really cool video coming out tomorrow morning. Really cool video where we have this is deep. Tomorrow's video in the morning. Tomorrow's morning video is deep. It's deep. It's deep. It's deep. It's an audit, but it's deep. That's all I got to say. All right. I better get the flock out of here. Thanks for coming, guys. If I didn't say your name, I love you. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate your subscription. Thank you, guys. Make sure you guys share the video. Listen, when I get off this live, I need you to go into the comments and leave comments in this video. We got to break the YouTube censorship algorithm because the people are subscribing like crazy, but we got to get the videos out. It's just like, it sucks. You have to work for this company you didn't ask to work for. I just wanted to make videos. I didn't want to live in your algorithm. If people like my videos, then they like them. And I didn't want to live like this. DLZ Clips and I got about 8 videos waiting to come out. But YouTube censors have rooms of people looking around going, I don't know if I like that right there. All right.